Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with historythroughcards.com. Hope you're all doing very well today. I finally did it. After years and years and years of trying to find a card of my all-time favorite band, I finally found one. It's Van Halen in the 1985 smash hits from Panini. I never owned any of these cards or stickers because they are stickers, so I didn't know what to expect. But I really wanted to find something from Van Halen, and I absolutely love Van Halen. I love the group with David Lee Roth, Diamond Dave, and I really enjoyed the group with Sammy Hagar as well. I'll show you the back of this just in case you guys have not seen any of these. I'm actually going to do another video on Panini Smash Hits and kind of go through some of the singers and the albums and the songs at some point. That's going to be a kind of a lengthy one, I think. But today, I wanted to tell you a little bit about Van Halen from an article in 1984. I think that there are some songs that Van Halen did that wouldn't have been able to be pulled off if Diamond Dave had still stuck around with Van Halen. And there are other songs that Sammy Hagar would not have been able to do had he actually done them. I really love a lot of Van Halen's early stuff when they first started, I believe in like 1972 or so. They were doing a lot of covers. And so in the description below, I'm going to list uh, some of their albums and a few individual songs. They did a cover of the Rover, which was a Led Zeppelin song. Actually, I think they did this song better than Led Zeppelin did. I'm a real big fan of Led Zeppelin too, and I know that they have cards. I think Panini stickers from like 1972. Panini is actually a really interesting manufacturer of cards. They go back to at least 1954, and so today a lot of collectors don't really like Panini, but I actually am a pretty big fan of Panini today. I think there is a great need for uh, Panini today, but if you're a modern collector, you're probably like, go away, and I can see why. A lot of the time, it really falls to good management and who you have employed with the company to make that company great. And so, really, Panini today needs a lot of ironing out, if you will. I do have a really interesting article from 1984 about Van Halen here. Let's get on to this article. I think you're going to find it really interesting. Here we go. This is from the Chicago Tribune, March 4th, 1984. Edward Van Halen's jump to keyboards really pays off by Jan de Nock. Sometimes life as a superstar is not as glamorous as it looks. Consider, for example, Edward Van Halen, ace guitarist and chief musical force behind Van Halen for the last 5 years, one of the most outrageously successful and gleefully obnoxious rock groups in America. Here he was on tour in Atlanta with a rare night off from performing and plenty of reason to celebrate. The band's current single, Jump, was still number one on the Billboard charts. Their new album, 1984, already had sold 1 million copies, and they had just been listed in the 1984 Guinness Book of World Records as the highest paid group, $1.5 million for their appearance at last summer's US festival. Add to that another musical coup, his guitar solo on Michael Jackson's enormous hit Beat It, and you have a guy with every right to feel good. There was just one problem. Edward Van Halen, reigning guitar hero of the 1980s, had the flu, and he was holed up in his hotel room trying to recuperate in time for the next night's show. The tour includes a March 13th date here at the Rosemont Horizon. How do you keep from getting the flu? He asked himself with resignation. Nothing that the band's usual pre-tour training regimen, a lot of exercises, stretching, whatever, had not kept him immune for long. I mean, even Charles Atlas gets the flu. It's just like going from the heat into the cold, into the hotels to the heat, and outside to the freezing cold, and Still, the only real question was not if he would play the next night, but how well. It depends on how sick you are, he said. I don't mean to get gross, but on the last tour I got the flu too, and I was standing behind the amps playing and throwing up at the same time. But the show must go on. If that kind of old fashioned showbiz dedication seems unreal, it is only because it comes from one fourth of Van Halen, a band that has carefully nurtured its public image as to one of the most hedonistic and irresponsible rock groups to strike terror in a parent's heart. That approach has been honed to perfection ever since 1974, when the Netherlands-born Van Halen brothers, Edward's older brother Alex, plays drums, teamed up with bassist Michael Anthony and the lead singer David Lee Roth while they were still attending high school in Los Angeles. By the time the band released its first album, Van Halen, in 1978, the extroverted Roth had found his true niche in life as a swaggering symbol and a lackadaisical spokesman for the Van Halen philosophy. Parties, parties, and more parties, with an upending supply of booze and pretty women to keep things interesting. But as the group continued to rack up million-selling albums, 1984 is the sixth, it soon became obvious that the real power behind the throne was not Roth's music, but Edward Van Halen's music. At 27, Van Halen is a recognized guitar virtuoso, able to toss off lightning fast, innovative solos that have put him into the same league with such legends as Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, and Jeff Beck, and have won him Guitar Player magazine's Best Rock Guitarists awards for 5 straight years. But thanks to his memorable contribution to Michael Jackson's monster hit Beat It, he is a People magazine favorite as well. Van Halen said his participation on Beat It, which didn't include appearing in the videos because he didn't have the time, was strictly a spur of the moment thing. Quincy Jones, the producer, just called me up one day and asked if I'd like to come down and play on it, he said. I had them rearrange it just a little bit because I didn't particularly like the part they wanted me to play. They wanted me to solo over. And they listened to me, changed it around a bit, and I did a solo and said bye. Some pop music observers contend that it was Van Halen's high-powered playing that really helped Beat It take off because his presence made the record instantly acceptable to the rock radio stations that had declined to play Jackson's earlier pop dance hits. And did Van Halen believe that his contribution to Beat It had been lost in all the hoopla over Jackson's 12 Grammy nominations a week before the awards ceremony? Well, if Michael wins a Grammy for that song and doesn't thank me, he said with a laugh, I'll kick his butt. Michael's backside appears to be in no imminent danger, for although the new winner of 8 Grammys thanked just about everyone but Edward Van Halen during the course of last Tuesday night's awards, his producer Quincy Jones did not forget to mention Beat It's greatest guitarist. When Grammy time rolls around again next year, there's a good chance that Van Halen and company will find themselves nominated, thanks to the extraordinary success of Jump, their first #1 single after a string of more than moderate hits, including a remake of Roy Orbison's Pretty Woman that reached the top 10 in 1982. The synthesizer-based Jump, a departure in sound from the band's usual guitar and drums approach, was a collaboration between Van Halen and lead singer Roth, even though they didn't work on it at the same time or even the same year. I actually wrote the music for Jump a couple of years ago, Van Halen said. I've always dabbled in the synthesizers and piano, but I guess we just waited to use that sound because it is kind of a challenge. What the music of Jump was waiting for all these years was a suitable set of lyrics from the ever inventive mind of Roth, who finally found his inspiration one night after he saw a TV news item on a man who was about to jump off a high rise office building. How did Roth turn that morbid theme into Jump, an unabashed anthem for the go get it school of positive thinking? You have to ask him, Van Halen said. I always just write all the music and he puts words to it. That, simply enough, is how the group's hit songs are created. And even though Alex Van Halen and Anthony rarely participate in the process, they always get equal songwriting credit and an equal share of the royalties. About 10 years ago, Van Halen explained, we sat down and asked ourselves, well, what are we going to do to get signed to a recording contract? And we said, well, we'll split everything 4 ways. It's kind of like getting married. You stick to it even though I'm the one who writes the music and Dave writes the lyrics. The non songwriting half of the marriage contributes in other ways, including keeping an eye out on business matters, designing album covers, and planning the group's videos. If the No Frills concert style video for Jump looks like it didn't require a lot of planning, that's because it didn't require a lot of planning. We just figured we might as well make it simple. Order some beer and pizza and shoot us jumping around, Van Halen said. I mean, there was no concept to it. Why not? Because that's what everybody's doing. The concept garbage. Actually, we did one like that for Pretty Woman 2 years ago, but I guess it was too much of a concept. They banned it for having too many pretty women on display. Not really. Actually, it had two midgets, a transvestite and a hunchback. If there's anything at all unusual about the band's Jump video, it's that for every shot of Edward Van Halen's guitar pyrotechnics, there's another one of him playing keyboards and quite happily. Isn't this the same guy who suddenly switched to guitar after years of classical piano training because he thought keyboards were too confining? I never meant that piano itself was confining, he explained. It was only confining because I was being taught, because I had to do everything by the book. I never got to improvise or noodle around or do what I wanted to do. I always had to do what the teacher made me do. That's what I meant by confining. So, just within the last 3 or 4 years, I've been getting more into keyboards. Actually, a lot of stuff on our records I write on keyboards and then apply to guitar. But there is a little danger that Van Halen will someday trade in his guitar for favor of a complete set of synthesizers. I just don't like guitar synthesizers, he said. Why not? It's a toughie to explain. Take keyboardist Jan Hammer. He plays guitar on a synthesizer. Basically, I don't see the point in that. I'd rather play guitar on guitar, and I'd rather play synthesizer on a synthesizer as opposed to synthesizer on a synthesizer guitar. Van Halen's rising stature as a composer has resulted in offers to write the soundtrack for 3 feature films, offers that will have to wait until the tour winds up and he can return to his recently completed backyard recording studio. I believe that's 5150. 3 of his songs on keyboards, he notes, recently were featured in The Seduction of Gina, a made for TV movie that starred Valerie Bertinelli of the One Day at a Time series, who for the last 3 years has also been Mrs. Edward Van Halen. The Van Halen's two-career marriage requires much cross-country travel. She flies out when she can, and I go home when I can, he said, but has had no effect on the band's touring schedule. We don't do anything special for us, he said. We just schedule tours the way we normally do, just like they don't schedule her TV show around me. It's just two completely separate things. But with all those movie soundtrack offers waiting for him at home, can he really look forward to his band becoming the 1990s equivalent of the Rolling Stones, over 40 and still on the road? I don't see why not, he said. I know for sure that I personally will be into music until I die. It might not be jumping up and down rock and roll, but I'll always be into music. For now, Van Halen still loves that concert routine. I never really get burned out, he said. Unless, I mean, how do you keep from getting the flu? I remember when 1984 came out. What a great album. That first track, oh my God. It's something that was really interesting because the cover art, and I believe that's Eddie Van Halen's son on the cover with the kid smoking the cigarette and the angel wings in the back, and it's a great cover. And I was really shocked to see that Van Halen actually had a card. I knew that they had a Panini card for a while, but I just haven't been able to get my mitts on it. And until quite recently, I was able to grab this particular copy. And as I say, I'm going to go through a lot more of the Panini Smash hits, and I can't wait to dive into that. Tell you the truth, um, as far as their other albums are concerned, 5150 is not that bad in my opinion. Um, their Van Halen album from 1978, I think, is perfect. Their covers, some of them are really great. The only problem that I have with a lot of their early stuff is the quality of the music. So you can't really beat good live music. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see Van Halen during their heyday, and I really wish I did. I was just too young to have seen them. So after David Lee Roth left Van Halen, I'm not entirely sure the exact date. I want to say it's like late 1985 or 1986. I don't really remember 1985 all that well, but I do remember there were two really great music videos that David Lee Roth did. One was California Girls, which I really like. The other one was Louis Prima's I'm Just a Gigolo. The video for that is really great. I really enjoy that even today. It's just fantastic. And David Lee Roth, he was actually on Joe Rogan's podcast. The interview was pretty great, I thought, and you can check it out over at Spotify. But yeah, David Lee Roth is a very interesting character, still is today, in fact. Am I sad that the band broke up? Yeah, I am, but all good things must come to an end. So we still have their music, and I will always enjoy David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar and Van Halen. I really like their albums. I'm going to leave some of those in the description below. Plus, there was a Rocket 88 song that Eddie Van Halen did with another musician, and their version of the Rover as well, which I really like. I kind of wish that the Rover had better quality sounds. I haven't found one yet, but it's still really great. And I'd love to hear what you guys think of Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar. He's not in this card, but he does have cards from 1987. And Sammy Hagar, he was a great singer before he joined Van Halen. One of the songs that he did, which I really love, is "I Can't Drive 55." Well, I can't drive 55 or 65 in a Ford Tortoise. So thanks, Ford. You know what they say about Ford, found on the road dead or fix or repair daily. But that's another story for another time. If you have any favorite albums of theirs or songs, let me know. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And until the next time, I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.